All right, we're going to get started now, and I want to introduce you to Dr. Judy Cannon from University of New Mexico, who's here to talk about a plethora of opportunities for students, basically from all levels, right? And then we will finish with Dr. Charlie, who will talk about another program that's related to NAU, U of A, etc., that you can be involved in after you leave NAU as an undergrad. So I'm going to turn it over.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks to Dr. Lee and in the past, Dr. Ingram for having me. And in the past, Dr. Chakirian, who was actually Dr. Lee's postdoc mentor, which is how I know Naomi. And so it's been great to continue the relationship because we're not so far away from you guys here at NAU. So I drove the 4.5 hours out from Albuquerque, and I'm really glad to be able to come and talk to you about the research programs that are available at UNM. So if you're interested in biomedical research, and I'll talk kind of broadly about what that means, and then the research programs that are available at UNM. As Naomi said, I am a professor. I'm in the Department of Molecular Genetics and Microbiology, and it's a very broad program. I'll talk to you a little bit about my own research. I am an immunologist. I study the immune response. We are in the School of Medicine, which means most of our research programs are biomedical. So we do have some health applications for most of our research programs, although we do focus on a lot of basic science, as we call it, and I'll kind of talk about what that means. So again, we're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, just west of here, pretty much straight shot on I-70. Okay, okay, great. So what does that mean? I don't know what level you might be at. You might be an undergraduate, you might be a master's student, but what does it mean to be a biomedical scientist? And often, if you're an undergraduate, you might be taking your courses, learning about what biology/chemistry in this case might mean. That's scientific learning. But often, if you're interested in research, I'd really encourage you to take opportunities to do research experiences. So again, I know you guys have research experiences available to you here at NAU while you're taking your classes, but a lot of students take advantage of summers where you don't have classes. You can devote dedicated amount of time to doing research, and I'll talk about what that it looks like at the University of New Mexico. But there's actually many institutions that have that, including here as well. But if you want to go a little bit farther away, I'll kind of talk through what UNM has for a summer research experience for an undergraduate. And then again, right, often many students take advantage of the research opportunities at their home institutions as they finish their undergrad. But sometimes, even at that point, either you might feel like, oh, I'm not totally sure what the research thing is about, not sure I want to devote my whole career to it, or just want a little bit more experience. And so some students take advantage of what we call this post-baccalaureate time. And so that's often 1 to 2 years after you finish your undergrad, and then you have a chance to do a little bit more just to make sure this is something you're interested in, maybe learn a few new techniques before you fully commit to a career in it. And then if you're ready to commit, then you can apply to what we call a graduate program, which is a PhD in our case. And then what you do is you have a curriculum where you obtain eventually a PhD. And that includes mentored thesis research. And I'll talk to you a little bit about how we fund our students. So again, what we're talking about, at least at UNM, all of these programs from the summer research program to a post-baccalaureate program to the PhD, you are funded, meaning you are paid for all of this. You don't have to take on debt. You don't have to pay your tuition. You don't have to take out any loans. Your parents/you don't have to work to pay for these programs. These are funded either by some by our institutions, but mostly by either private foundations, funders, or the National Institutes of Health. And so again, we have applied for grants that pay for, again, if you do a summer, you're paid, as well as your room and board is paid for. And then a post-baccalaureate, where 1 to 2 years you receive a stipend, and you are again paid for the time you spend doing that research. And throughout the PhD, we guarantee funding for all of our students. That means you don't pay any tuition and you are guaranteed a stipend for the full time that you are doing a PhD. So again, none of this should you expect to go into any kind of debt. to hopefully prepare you for a career in biomedical science. Okay, this is pretty informal. There's not too many of you. So if you have questions, feel free to just raise your hand during. Happy to answer questions, or I'll just keep going if I don't see anything. Okay, so in terms of the undergraduate research time. So again, we have a summer research program that's called the Undergraduate Research or Pipeline Network, UPN. And usually it starts right after Memorial Day. And then it goes through to the end of July, early August, something like that. I think the tentative dates are up there. And the goal is to really develop interest in research, exposure to research, and develop some research skills for students to be able to decide, this is something you're interested in. And honestly, there's really no pre-preparation required. We often have sophomores or juniors, some with no research experience coming in. Of course, if you do have some already because you've been, say, in Dr. Lee's lab or Dr. Ingram's lab, it's helpful, but it's not required. So that if you are thinking about, oh, this sounds like it might be interesting to do, you can just apply. If you get accepted, you will be in a laboratory for the summer. The goal is for mentors, I have UPN students. It's our job to teach you, to give you the skills that you need to do a research project. So again, even if you don't have a lot of experience, if you're interested, feel free to apply. And so again, what you usually do in the application is to say what your interests are, whether it's neuroscience, whether it's immunology, infectious disease, whether it's toxicology. We have a really broad range of biomedical science that's available. And most students will indicate, oh, I might be interested in this, cancer, cardiovascular disease, whatever. And then the lead is Dr. Jen Gillette. She will match you with the mentors who are at University of New Mexico in the Health Sciences Center. So we have a school of medicine, we have a college of pharmacy, we have a nursing school, we have a public health school. So again, depending on where your interests are, she would match you with a mentor that matches your interest. And so then you do the mentored research. So you would have a project for your summer that you go into the laboratory and you do, whatever research is happening. So this could range from very basic research. I'll talk a little bit about what I do. For example, you can work with cell lines, animals, etc. Or you can do even public health, bioinformatics. Like there's a whole range of things based on what your mentor and you are interested in. And then she conducts career development seminars. So again, we do have a lot of people, if you're interested in medical school, if you're interested in a PhD, she basically has seminars where she explores all these different career options that are related to research. So you go once a week and she has course sessions about what each of those career paths might look like. How would you get in? I think she even write a letter of intent, kind of a personal statement as a part of that, as well as general career sort of development skills like time management, those kinds of things. So that's once a week. And then she has lots of fun. So Jen is the director of this, is a big climber. She loves to climb. So she takes everybody to the climbing gym. She takes everybody on hikes. They go on a rafting trip down the Rio Grande out of Taos, for example. So they focus on making sure everybody has a good time as well as learning in the laboratory. So that's all part of it. And so that hopefully by the end, it's 8 weeks, you actually prepare through your own research a poster where you present your research to anybody in the community as well as your other cohort. And so then by the end, she steps you through, everybody's confident, you've developed some research skills, you have a project, you have results, and you can present it to, both other colleagues as well as other faculty members. And then you feel confident in moving forward with your career. So that is the undergraduate pipeline network. So if you're interested in doing a summer research, the application portal is usually already open. The deadline is February, and then you would be notified usually around, I think, April, whether you're accepted, and then you can prepare to come to Albuquerque, stay for the summer, and then she works on all those logistics. Okay, any questions, comments?
I just make one comment.
Yes.
This If you think, I don't really know exactly what I wanna do, one good thing is to go try this and see if it's something that I did the same thing as an undergrad, didn't really know. Some experiences were like, this is great, some of them are like, I don't wanna be a physical chemist. So it helps you to see what things you might like, and it's really, I think as an undergrad, it's great to get different experiences, so.
Yeah, because there's no commitment. Exactly. Like if you're like, hey, this is not for me, great. You were paid, you had a summer job, you can move on. Exactly. Versus, oh, this is very interesting. Then it really builds your CV. It builds, your sort of resume if this is what you want to do. I would say, yes, hopefully it's a win-win. Exactly. Yeah.
What's the housing situation?
So if you're from out of town, they put you up in the dorms. So just the standard dorms, you can get dorm food. And it's right across the street from so how UNM is, they have the undergraduate campus across from the medical school. And so you would walk like across that big street to laboratories and things like that. But yes, they house you. And again, they pay for all of that. So, okay, great. So now, oh yeah, so again, you get a research stipend, you get a poster presentation if you do a great job, you can get an award. I believe that actually comes with some cash prizes as well. Again, you get housing paid for if you are from out of town. And one of the things that we really encourage all students to do as part of their program is everyone writes as they prepare their poster presentation for the end of the summer is to submit that abstract to SACNAS, for example, or a conference of your choice. And and the program helps you apply for travel awards. And so we've had multiple UPN students be able to take that same poster. It's already made. You've already presented it and take that to a conference, and the conference would be paid for. So that's been really fabulous. I think, I don't know if that happened with Crystal in the past, like that's been a really nice pipeline. You feel like you get to go to a national conference to, again, present that research. And so and again, the program through those courses helps you prepare that. And then, like we said, it's a program with usually, yeah, about 40. Last year, we actually had about 55. And so that you really have a cohort. I would say it's about maybe 50% from New Mexico with New Mexico connections, but about 50% that come from nationally. So it is not just New Mexicans, but I think we've had multiple students from NAU come but even, East Coast, Texas, etc. And then, right, you get to do cutting edge research projects in the biomedical sciences or public health because we are a health sciences center. Again, lots of activities. And, we do have a lot of students who, especially if you have access to a car, they'll like go, do outdoor activities on their own on the weekends, which is really fun for them. Okay. And so I would say these are and I'll talk more about the specifics, but we do have a whole range of biomedical sciences. I would say the big focuses for us we do have a biochemistry, molecular biology, as well as cell biology. And, but we have really big group in neuroscience, toxicology, pharmaceutical sciences. We have a lot of groups there that also work with tribal communities. Since of course our proximity, just like you guys have here, we have a comprehensive cancer center. We have a big program in cardiovascular disease and environmental health. We have center, and as well as infectious disease, which is part of the center that I'm a part of as well. So again, we do have a pretty broad range of the kinds of research that's available. Okay, so now you've graduated with your undergrad, and maybe you did a summer program, maybe not, you didn't have a chance to, and maybe you got to do some research in a lab, but maybe you did study abroad and you didn't have as much research as you thought, so you're not totally sure if you want to commit. So prep is often this is a term for the post-baccalaureate research programs. And so we actually have two prep programs that are at UNM. Again, these are funded. We have one that's funded by the American Cancer Society and one that's funded by the NIH, National Institutes of Health, the federal government. Unfortunately, there's a lot of upheaval in the federal government if you haven't kept track. And so that funding is less certain. Actually, Dr. Charlie was a graduate of our prep program, an NIH funded program. So we've had a long tradition of very successful graduates. And, but right now it was funded for this last year, but we're not sure it will be funded for next year. But we actually have this cancer research prep, which is funded and it's not going away. And in fact, I believe, added slots to try to make up for the uncertainty of the federal government, the budget there. So this will continue. So what happens is that this is a program where you've received your bachelor's degree, but you're not sure you want to do a PhD yet, but you want a little more experience. One, it could be just to know, again, kind of like Dr. Ingram said, you kind of want to know if this is what you want, or you're not sure that your research background might make you competitive for the research programs that you want to apply for as a PhD student. And so this is a good way to get that experience as well. And again, this is paid. So you get a stipend, you don't have to pay anything, and you basically get more research experience. Again, you are paired with a mentor. You work in that mentor's lab for, I believe this is a full 2-year program. Previously we had a 1 to 2 year program. I'm not totally sure. I think this is a 2-year program. So again, you're paid for 2 years to get more research experience. I do believe they also have where you, again, they help you write a letter of intent. If you do want to go on to a PhD or medical school, for example, like they help you with that application process as well. And so this applications are open starting December, so that you start basically like August of the next year, and you go through the academic year doing research, and again, taking some courses as well. Okay.
Couple questions.
Yeah.
Do you accept postmasters for this one?
I think they probably do. I want to say that as long as you don't have a PhD, you're probably eligible.
Master's students.
So yeah, if you feel like, especially right, if you didn't have a chance to do sort of biomedically related research and you want a little bit more, because yeah, the techniques, sort of the types of problems are a little bit different. So I think there's no restriction on that as far as I know.
Can students do the summer program and then roll into this program? Or is the summer only for if you're still in?
I believe we don't accept seniors postgraduate. So
Okay.
that undergraduate pipeline is only for the summer after your sophomore year. A few freshmen, not very many. Usually after sophomore year, after junior year. I think they did make a couple of exceptions, but maybe only for COVID, like because they couldn't. But generally, I think they would encourage you to apply for something like this if you're graduating and you want more research, but they don't do just the summer for a graduated student.
Okay.
So, okay. And then now you've done all that research and you think that you are ready to do a full PhD. So we have a PhD program. It's called the Biomedical Sciences Graduate Program. And again, this is kind of what it looks like. Our application, kind of standard, like many biomedical sciences graduate programs, due December 1st. We ask for some basic, any usually biology/chemistry undergrad would have all of these, but it is kind of courses. We ask for recommendation letters, but we are really looking for people who have experience in laboratory research. Part of this is to really know whether you want to do a PhD, so I do think some students, if you don't understand what a PhD is, often it's difficult, it's a struggle to be successful. Or I certainly have students who decide, a little bit in like, actually, I didn't realize this is what it was about, and I don't actually like this very much, which is totally fine. You don't have to love it, but if you don't, and you end up in a PhD, it's probably not appropriate. So that's why we look for laboratory research experience to show that you actually understand what the whole process is. But it is a holistic admission in that we do have, if you didn't have a chance to take a course, partly because you were doing research in that and you didn't, like for whatever reason, you can write in, well, I did in high school, or I didn't do it because, and here's the substitution for why I still have experience in that. So it's not an absolute requirement, but this is our recommendations for prerequisites for our graduate program. And then for admission, what we do is we have an admissions committee. They look at all of this, and then if we feel like you would be a good fit, you show interest, we're interested in you, we invite you for an interview. That means we pay for you to travel to Albuquerque, and then we set you up with, usually 3 to 5 faculty. You talk, you usually indicate some interest. Again, similar to UPN, you say, oh, I'm interested in infectious disease or neuroscience or both or cancer. And then they would set you up with faculty who are doing that research. You talk about what research opportunities are available, what research experience you've had, and that's the interview process. And it's also for students who haven't had a chance. We do get applicants from all over the country. So if you haven't had a chance to visit Albuquerque, it's a nice chance to come. If you're going to spend, 4 to 6 years there, want to know what it's like, make sure you like it. And so that's the interview. And after the interview would be when we would, offer acceptance to our program. And then once you're accepted, then we have, again, this is fairly standard for most programs. The first year has coursework as well as what we call rotations. So again, just to make sure you understand this whole process until you graduate, you are committed, that you have commitment for funding. So you are starting to be paid on day one, and then you're paid until the, day you graduate. And so, but the first year, you're not committed to working with anyone specific. What you're doing is taking coursework. This is off, basic molecular cell biology. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But what really is a focus is that you identify 3 potential mentors whose work you're interested in, but you get to try it out. You don't have to commit right away. You basically do about 10 week, what we call rotations. You join that lab, but only for 10 weeks. And then you see how it goes. How do you like the work? Do you feel like this work, like in my lab, I tell people I work with animals. I work with mice. We kill mice in my lab on the daily. Are you okay with this? And some students think they're okay. They come to my lab, they try it out. They're not okay. That's fine. The rotation's the time to figure that out, or a summer program, etc. Right? And so, or how well do you get along with your mentors? Are your communication styles, similar? Or are you a student who likes to talk to their mentor a lot, but that mentor travels 2 weeks out of the, month because they're always busy, so that's the time to figure that out. And so you get to try out 3, and, if you really need to, and 3 aren't perfect, you can do a 4th, but that's the time to really figure out who is the mentor you want to do your thesis work with. And then at the end of our first year, you have an exam to make sure, you learned all the coursework material. You move on. And then after you do that, there are still a few courses, if you say, oh, I actually need a little bit more in biostat or, but then it's just thesis work. You go into a laboratory and you pretty much are there basically full time doing the research project that you've chosen that your mentor, is working on. And so then that could take, I would say, for most students, 3 to 4 years is pretty standard. Very short is 3. I would say very few people finish before 4 years. Not too many people finish past 5 and a half. I would say that's very typical. And there we have another exam, but it's not really an exam. It's basically you write up your thesis proposal. This is what you want to do. This is your plan. You think through, read all the literature. This is what's been done before. This is what I want to do. And then you present it to a committee who, talks to you about it, asks you questions like, this is a good idea. Why did you choose that, etc. That's the exam. But once you do that, that's it. You finish your thesis work and then you can graduate. So that's kind of the overall process. So that, again, you're paid the stipend the whole time. So for us, this varies a little program to program. We pay our students $30,000. I tell students, you won't get rich, but hopefully you shouldn't have to take loans. Like it should be enough to support you. Have a decent apartment, maybe not a nice one, a decent one. You should be able to pay for the basics, maybe not a lot of trips, for example, but and then your health insurance and tuition are covered. So again, you do not need to pay extra. You really are not expected to go into any kind of debt for this program, and that's guaranteed for the full time you are in the program. Okay. And then, so again, for us, what the core curriculum looks like for a PhD student is, again, we kind of make sure, we do have students who sometimes come from, chemistry or even engineering who want to do biomedical science. We just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. We do go through some basic experimental design and methods, again, not everyone's had experience with all the different, basic, microscopy, flow cytometry, et cetera. So you get an introduction into that. And then you start specializing in the spring. So now you can choose between, if you're interested in neurobiology versus immunology, you can start taking those specific courses. And this usually aligns with, the laboratories you are interested in. And then after that, you join, the laboratory. Again, you choose laboratory rotations in any area. I mean, you could choose one neuro, one infectious disease, one cancer. Like, you're not limited. It's purely based on your interests as well as the availability of the mentor. So we are a umbrella program, as we call it. So any student that comes in can have the choice of any program. It's not like you are accepted only into neurobiology and you can only do neuro, that you can choose from any laboratory. And so it's kind of up to you and the mentor just to work it out. Okay, so again, once you're out of that first year, your life is really in the lab. So about 60% of our laboratories use animal research just because we are biomedical science. That's kind of the most common model for biomedical science. But some do more clinical studies where you might work with patient samples, get samples from patients, analyze them. But basically everyone does work in the laboratory, and that comes with then analyzing your data. You collect data, you analyze it, and then you have to write it up, because ultimately what a PhD is about making a fundamental discovery that no one has an answer to before. You have to know what's been done before. You have to know what hasn't been done. You do something novel, new, that's your contribution. That's what a PhD is. And so you have to write it up in order to let everyone know what you've done. And then often you can present it in the form of a manuscript, which is available to everyone, when you publish it. But this also includes attendance at conferences where you can, again, go and present your research to, orally, for example. And then we can continue to do coursework. Most of our students continue to do what we call journal clubs, which are, again, discipline specific. You read a paper, that's a manuscript that's published, you discuss it weekly. So that's often, and then additional coursework as you feel you might need to, continue your own education if it's appropriate. Okay, so this is just what our outcomes look like for our PhD students. But I would say that it's pretty typical for many PhD programs, is that, again, I would say the vast, vast majority of our students finish between 4 and 6 years, maybe 7. But that's certainly MD PhDs, if you know anything about it. If you're interested in that, I'm happy to talk about it, but that's a very small group. Not everyone's interested. 8 is really the minimum, honestly, for an MD PhD, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of PhD added together. But most of our red PhDs, a very few finish late, but often this is sort of life circumstance. But the vast majority finish between this 4 and 6-ish years. And then these are the outcomes for our students. And again, I would say, reading broadly the literature for PhD students, pretty typical. So, we have about a quarter that stay in research in some degree. So you might become a professor, like your professors here, me, who continue to both maybe teach a little bit, but continue to do research. But that's really a smaller and smaller percentage. A lot of our students go on to do sort of science-related careers, but in other contexts. So because we're in New Mexico, we have people who go into government. We are by Sandia Labs. We have Los Alamos Labs, which is pretty close by. We do have students go to those national labs. We call that government. I know in the East Coast, a lot of people historically, I don't know if that's still available, say go to the NIH, for example. And again, a lot of those careers are not research anymore. They're not at the bench. They're not doing experiments, but they still help the research, what we call this research enterprise. And so a lot of people can continue to do science-related careers, but not, active research anymore. And so that's, we do have quite a few people go into government. And then we actually have a smattering of a lot of other types of careers, especially biotech. I would say biotech, pharma, added together is probably the greatest percentage. And again, there's a little some here, some in Albuquerque in the state of New Mexico, but sometimes people use this as a chance to move, to the East Coast, to the West Coast, et cetera. And that's an opportunity to go into biotech pharma. There are a few companies in town, Arizona, et cetera, but I would say we are a smaller place for that. Often it's California, Washington State, Seattle area, and the East Coast. And so I'll highlight a couple people who've gone on and done some of those things, but I would say that's sort of the most. But there's a lot of available careers. I actually I just handed it off, a seminar series called Careers Outside Academics. So again, if you're a PhD scientist in the biomedical field, you have a lot of opportunities available to you. It's up to each person to decide what's best for them. And so we have people going into teaching, obviously, and we mean predominantly teaching, no more real research, just teaching. This could be at the college level, community college level, or even high school level. We have people who go into scientific writing, we call it. So they might write for scientific publications. They might write FDA applications, et cetera. So there's lots of different things. And in this seminar series, I kind of highlight all the different kinds of careers. We bring people in to talk about what they do in their different careers to let you guys know what's available, or all the trainees know what's available to them. So this is kind of an overall view of what life looks like after a PhD, and then what you would do as a career for the rest of after you obtain your PhD. Okay, so then I'll close by talking a little bit about what we call a training grant that I'm a co-director of. And sadly, again, with all the upheaval with the NIH, this was terminated earlier this year. It was litigated. Terminations were deemed unlawful, so it came back. So I can still talk about it. I have taken this out, but in the reality is we've applied for additional training grants. And again, historically, I'm hoping it'll come back. The government was very committed to training students. They understood that having trained PhD scientists was very good for both the population in terms of health outcomes, as well as for economic development. So, there's a lot of data out there showing that for every dollar invested by the NIH, you get $3 to $5 out in terms of industry. So that, of course, is really good for the economy. And so the NIH would give out money to institutions who could show that they did a good job training graduate students. And so we applied for this. We showed this is our track record. Here's our plan to really help train students become successful as biomedical scientists. And we received money to train 5 students per year for 3 years. And the NIH gave us money. So that paid for these students' stipends and their health insurance and their tuition for those 3 years. But on top of that, we said, hey, we're going to give them an additional supports and curriculum to make sure that they're successful. And we continue to work with the students even after they're out of the program. So that's what we commit to the NIH for them to give us this money. So this one is called Initiative for Maximizing Student Development, but we've already applied for other training grants. So this is not the only one. It's the one I'm most familiar with. So I'll talk to you a little bit about it, but we actually have 4 training grants at UNM. So many of our students are supported. Again, it doesn't matter. You get the same amount of money either way, whether it comes from NIH or not, but these are sort of sometimes come with additional supports if we have these training grants. And so what we do, if you are accepted both as a graduate student, but then as a scholar of this training grant, is that we actually bring all of our students 4 weeks before graduate school starts. And we do kind of what we call a jump start, which is we have courses, but these students go ahead and get a rotation going early so that they kind of just get acclimated. Some of our students are not from Albuquerque, so this is a chance to move, get settled, get to know the area. But really, it's this cohort building. So there's a lot of data to show that the closer you have, if you feel a cohort effect, if you can make friends with those colleagues, that really helps support you as you go through the PhD process. And so we do a lot of cohort building activities, as well as sort of, again, career development, time management. What does grad school look like? How do you manage the stress? Wellness, for example, all of that, as well as resources that are available. And then once school starts, you're with everyone else. All these scholars are with all the other graduate students, but we continue to meet with all our scholars. We form these learning communities. We meet monthly to make sure everything's going well and that you continue to get support you need. And then for the entire time you're a scholar. So for the first 3 years, we meet, and even after technically you graduate from this program and you continue to do your thesis research, of course, you're still on campus. So we continue to meet together. And then we also have a peer mentoring program. And honestly, it was so successful that they've expanded it to everyone. So it's not special anymore to our scholars. So we're really committed to peer mentoring. So when you first come into the PhD program, you're assigned a mentor who's a more advanced graduate student, 3rd, 4th year, just to help you, acclimate, figure out what's going on. And if you have any issues, you can go to them sort of as an additional resource. But that's all part of the program. And what the NIH does, because we commit to supporting these students, is they give us money, again, to pay for tuition, insurance, and stipend. But again, even if you aren't supported on the T, you would get your insurance, stipend, and tuition paid for in a different mechanism. But here it's nice that the NIH gives us this money. That means the institution doesn't have to come up with the money. And then we can report back to the NIH that we've done a good job, and our trainees are successful. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up here by just telling you a little bit about what it means to do a project in my own lab. And I'll also talk a little bit about the lab that Naomi did her PhD. And usually he comes with me. He wasn't able to come with me, but I'll still talk about his research. So again, what is a biomedical PhD? Again, PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy, usually 4 to 6 years, 7 years sometimes. But it's really to do original research, to make new discoveries, fundamental discoveries of things we don't know, previous knowledge. And so the research is basically to first read about what's been done before. So you have to know that you're not just repeating what somebody else has done. That's reading what we call the literature, what other people have done. And then you say, oh, what's left to be done? Like what do we still not know? That seems interesting to do. And you ask that question, and then you say, oh, how could we answer that question? And then you design an experiment to get an answer. So that's usually what a PhD is. So for me, in my lab, I'm interested in the immune response. So here I do a lot of microscopy, so I have a lot of videos. But basically, my personal overall question, and I actually did my PhD somewhat on this as well, because lots of questions still unanswered. So what happens is that we have an immune system, and when there's no infection, no problem. It's just sitting there. This is actually a video of what happens when there's no infection. We have immune cells that, in this case, a T cell, that's the cell I'm interested in. They move around, but they don't do too much. What happens is that when we get infection, in my lab, we use influenza, virus as a model of infection, which of course all of us are sadly familiar with. Many of us get flu. Is that when we get the flu, what happens? So lots is known about what happens, but one of the things that's not known is what do T cells do when they get to the lung, and how do they clear infection? So normally what we do already understand is that flu, for example, infects the lung. Then bits of the flu are carried to what we call the local lymph node. That's where immune responses happen. T cells are these immune cells that I study, are in the lymph node, and these are the little green things, and they get activated there. They know that now an infection has happened. What they have to do is now go back to the lung, because that's where the virus is. And then one of my big questions was, when those T cells get to the lung is huge compared to a little T cell. The virus is not everywhere. How does the T cell know where the virus is? How does it find it? And how does it find it fast enough such that the virus doesn't, expand so much that it kills us before we kill it? Because it's up to the T cell to find those virally infected cells and kill it. And that's how we get better. And so, one of the questions that I've had is, what are the molecules that can drive this process? How do T cells know where to go? And then what are the molecules that help it know where to go? And then what does that movement look like? So that's one thing I've done. That's why I do a lot of microscopy, is we can take videos of all these cells moving, we can trace them and then say, what are they doing? Like, where are they going? How fast are they going? Where exactly in the lung do they go? and I'll show you a little bit of the analysis that we've been able to do, is that we take a video. This is actually from a mouse that's been infected with the flu. We take out its lung as the flu infection is still there. The flu is in red. We stain it for the flu virus proteins, and then the T cells are in green. So we know the T cells have been activated in the lymph node. They've made it back to the lung. How do they find where those flu infected cells are? So we actually started tracking each individual cell like this. So we can take one cell, we can track its movement, and then we can say at different time points, how fast is it going? What is it really doing? And so this is actually done by a postdoc in the lab at the time. But that we saw that actually a lot of cells would go for quite a while, often between 20, 30 minutes. It would just move, but then it would stop for like 10 minutes and then go again. Why? We're not sure yet, but so it's kind of interesting. Now we can start asking the questions of how does it go? How does it stop? Where does it know where to go? When does it know how to stop, etc. And so one of the things that we did actually, this is, I'm not showing you all the data. We do have some molecules we think drive this process. Then we can inhibit those molecules, see if it changes. But the really interesting thing that actually this postdoc noticed when he was really looking at the T cells is he said, let's compare the T cell movement to places where they're very close to the flu, which is the very red areas, versus when they're far away from the flu, which is those black areas. So obviously the flu's not everywhere. It's only in some places. Does the T cell move differently when it's close to versus far away from the flu? And in fact, he found it was. So you can see that this is flu positive fraction. So when it's really black, no flu. It's 0. When it's really filled with flu, it's like 80% red. And so we track the T cells, and you can see that actually the T cells that are far away from the flu move quite a bit faster than the T cells that are close to the flu. So it really looks like as they get close to the flu, they slow down. And then he said, well, we know they stop. What about the stop time? So he could look at the stop time, and he saw that again, when they're far away from the flu, they stop for much shorter times, more close to 5-6 minutes. But when they're really surrounded by flu, they would stop for up to 15 minutes. So it really seems like what the T cells do is that when they're far away, they actually move around faster. But when they get close to a flu positive area, they stop, which would make sense because that's the place they need to actually find the flu infected cells to kill them. So again, likely they have signals once they get to the flu to know to stop on it and to kill it. And so we're also figuring out what those signals are. We can then perturb them. So again, this is sort of a project where we don't know how it happens. We try to figure out ways to analyze the data in a way that answers the questions that we're interested in. So that's a little bit from my lab. I'm interested in how T cells clear flu infection. And one of the graduate students that helped do some of that project, she's actually graduated in 2019. She was on a T32, a different T32 than the one I just talked about. That one wasn't funded till she was graduated, but we actually have a training grant that is still funded, that is on infectious disease and immunology. After she left my lab, she graduated from my lab. She actually only took 4 years. She actually did a lot of research as an undergraduate. She did a prep program, so she was very experienced. She came in, jumped right in, and was able to finish in 4 years. And she published 2 papers while she's in my lab. We're actually working on her last paper, still not fully finished. So, she left before we completed all the studies. Somebody else has helped complete them, but then the pandemic and all of this. So I just emailed her this week. We are going to submit your paper still, don't worry. But she ended up doing a postdoc. She moved out to San Francisco Bay Area at this Chan Zuckerberg BioHub, which is this big, funded by the Facebook founder, Mark Zuckerberg and his wife. And then, so they have a lot of research there. She did a bunch of research on infectious disease there. And then she actually stayed in San Francisco. And now she is a science officer at this California Institute of Regenerative Medicine. So again, it's kind of California's equivalent of the NIH. They have a state-funded institute that funds scientific research. So she works with, she's out of the lab, she's out of an academic institution, but she works with researchers only within the state of California, and she will give them money in the form of grants in order to do their research. So that's her role now. Again, she published several papers while she was in my lab. And then I'll finish up talking about the Shakarian lab. So Bryce Shakarian, again, he is usually here with me. That's why I always have his slides. I decided not to take them out because he does very interesting work, which is he works on vaccine development. And so he is an infectious disease guy and an immunology guy because he wants to design vaccines that can elicit the right kind of immune response to fight that infectious disease. But he actually has extended it to other areas like chronic illness, opioids. I'll talk a little bit about that. But basically, he uses a very specific platform. He started this as a postdoc himself, has taken it to his lab, and now trained many people, including Dr. Lee, to continue this work. And so this kind of science is basically wanting to make a molecule that looks like a virus. It's not a virus. It doesn't make you sick. It cannot replicate like a virus does, but that it looks enough like a virus that it tricks our immune system to thinking, oh, this is something bad, we need to respond. And that's a good thing when we're talking about a vaccine, because we want to elicit a strong immune response to protect ourselves against a future infection. And so what he does is design these virus-like particles where he can basically take almost any protein / component of a virus or anything that he wants to target and say, okay, we want to make it now look like that thing, and it could display whatever target you want. And these are designed to be able to really pack a lot of that target within this small particle, such that now your immune system says, hey, this is like a virus. I need to mount a really strong immune response against it, but that it's very regulated so that you don't actually really get sick, but you mount a strong response such that when you actually see the infectious particle later, like the actual virus, then you'll already be protected. So how does this work? He actually has a lot of projects where they actually use these VLPs to target infectious disease. He has a current project that's funded that's against malaria, HIV, HPV, which is human papilloma virus, which causes cervical cancer. Which ones did you work on when you were? Gonorrhea. Oh, I think that's still funded, actually. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of infectious diseases that we don't have current vaccines for, of course. So the VLP actually was successfully developed as the first approved HPV vaccine. And so there are approved vaccines that use this platform, but there's a lot of infectious disease that we don't have good vaccines for yet. And so he's certainly working on those. And so then these VLPs can help to elicit, especially these antibody responses that are very protective, that then could potentially protect us if we're exposed to the actual, say, malaria parasite. But the other interesting things that he's turned his attention to more recently is actually there's many diseases that aren't from a pathogen, not from a virus, not from a bacteria, but a chronic disease that, for example, we make too much of something that's going to make us sick. So in this case, he's actually had a project where basically cholesterol, again, we know that very high cholesterol, especially this high or low LDL, low density lipoproteins, we have too high of levels of that, then we have heart disease and cardiovascular disease. It's very bad for us. And so he's been able to actually target a molecule that makes LDL so that if you don't have that molecule, you will be able to have much lower levels of cholesterol, protecting those people against the developing cardiovascular disease. They know it works because there's actually some humans who have a deficiency in this. They're perfectly fine, but they never get heart disease. So, those kinds of natural experiments, as we call it in the human population, suggest that this could be a really good target. So he's basically designed a vaccine against that protein to try to protect those of us who don't have that fortunate mutation that might be prone to heart disease, that if he can suppress that protein could lower, say, the risk of heart disease. Another project that actually is in a similar vein that's in collaboration with another faculty member in our department who works on Alzheimer's disease is we know that Alzheimer's, they have these pathological protein aggregates in the brain. That's what kills the neurons. So they have actually designed a vaccine against those proteins. to try to clear those tangles, they call it, in that they've had some success in animal models. So they actually are moving it to clinical trial. Well, not quite clinical trial. They're developing the process to take it to clinical trial, phase 1. And so again, a vaccine strategy against a chronic illness that's not really caused by like a pathogen, but again, we know there's protein that's bad, then we can try to clear it using these kinds of methods. So that's 2 projects in his lab. And the final one that's been quite interesting, he's actually developed with another postdoc actually who's also continued in her research career, but stayed at UNM. Catherine Fritz is actually targeting opioids. So again, sadly, we know that this is addiction to opioids is a really big problem, especially in our state, but everywhere. And that, of course, overdose, too much opioids, that's what leads to death. And so that they've actually taken a vaccine approach, which is to try to couple fentanyl, opiates, morphine, etc., to the VLP, and then vaccinating in a way where you take a bit of it so you don't get the effects of it, but then you can elicit an immune response against these, again, these antibodies, so that hopefully the goal is that once a person, unfortunately, if they're exposed to a high dose, maybe unintentionally, of fentanyl, of opioids, that the antibodies would actually coat that in the bloodstream and prevent it from going into the brain and causing especially the respiratory depression that what leads to overdose deaths in people who are addicted to opioids. So again, kind of a different approach to some of these health problems, but it's actually works in animals. So they've gotten quite a bit of funding from the NIH, who are interested in novel approaches, because unfortunately many of our approaches are not working well for people who are they're not benefiting from whatever approaches that are existing. So those are the kinds of projects that are in Bryce's lab. So again, this is a graduate student in his lab. She also graduated in 5 years. Then she wanted something different. She was from New Mexico, had grown up there, gone to undergrad and did her PhD. So she actually went to Boston and did a postdoc at Merck in infectious disease through the pandemic. She worked on COVID, and then when Moderna got huge because they of course developed the vaccine, she actually Merck is across the street from Moderna in Boston, so she just walked across the street and got a job. She's currently still there at Moderna, still developing vaccines for now. She still works on infectious disease, but I think Moderna has a lot of cancer therapies that they're developing too. So again, going from Bryce's lab where she published, she actually worked on more of these, the plasma triglycerides. So she worked on that cholesterol project, but then she also had some experience doing vaccine development for Zika virus, for example, infections as well. So again, that's the path she took. We have many graduates who stay in the state, but the 2 from our labs happen to go out of state. Okay, so that's it for me. Happy to answer questions. I have a few flyers as well as a little bit of like swag, like the stress balls I always love. All of us can use less stress in life. Feel free to take whatever. I have more. I can refill if you take it all, no problem. But I'm also happy to answer any questions either now or individually. I'll stay for a few minutes after. Yes.
Your PhD MD program,
Yeah.
Do you fund all 8 years, or is it just the 4 years of it?
So all 8 years are funded. So the medical school side is funded. We actually got an NIH grant that funds for the MD years. We also have, institutional money that funds a couple of people. And then during your research time, it's the same. Like either you can apply for one of these Ts or your research mentor would commit to paying for the stipend during that time. So all 8 years are funded, but from different sources, but yes, it would be the full coverage. There is info about the MD PhD there too, if that's the road you're considering. Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, well, thank you for coming. Thanks again to my hosts for having us again. It's always fun to come and chat and catch up. And like I said, my email is here. You can Google me. I'm happy to answer questions, direct you to the right people if I don't know the answer, if you have any follow-up there. All right, thanks.
Well, thank you, Judy.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so we're not done yet, almost. And so if, or actually, when you decide to go on to graduate school, or if you're already in a master's program, we have funding that is in partnership with the University of New Mexico and other universities that you could apply to. Let's here talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you, Judy, for all your information. So I actually was in two of the programs at UNM. So one was IMSD, and that got me through my undergraduate. So they supported and trained me. So it was a really good program. And then I also did the prep program, but the non-cancer one, I did that for 1 year, and that was really great. So thank you for
One of our
Oh,
shiny
that-
examples from our program, we'd like to claim those.
Okay, so I'm not gonna take too much of your time. I'll just go through this really quickly, but we're our STEAM, the Southwest Transformative Educational Advancement and Mentoring Program. So this is a partnership between multiple institutions like UNM, NAU, Burrell, yeah, I was trying to say osteopathic medicine, NMSU, and then we're trying to bring U of A on board to that too. So I'm just gonna give a quick overview. So STEAM Network is a program that supports our scholars that are conducting cancer health disparities research. So if you're still interested in cancer research, that's what those are the types of scholars that we support. So we have things like one-on-one mentorship and a lot of professional development and workshops. We mainly support the graduate level to the early stage investigator levels. So when you become a graduate student, you know, you're wanting to know what opportunities there are for you. So that would be the STEAM network. So as I mentioned, we have Burrell College of Osteopathic Medicine, NMSU, NAU, and UNM. Yeah, so basically the same thing that I said, we're in these different sites. So we're trying to get started establishing U of A into STEAM. And I'm also what's known as a training champion. So what I do is recruit students that are, you know, about to graduate, or, you know, if recently we just sent Marinka Fainu to the UNM cancer prep programs as well. And then she's also has become a scholar in the STEAM program as well. So we also accept post-bac students. So this is me here, training champion at NAU, and then Martha is the training champion at UNM. And then we just have recently got a new training champion for NMSU and also Burrell. Her name is Brianna Evans. So we're still getting her onboarded onto her new role. So the purpose and objectives of STEAM is to enable scholar access to training, relevant training resources across these institutions, technical and career skill building tools like professional development and educational and career goals. And also to facilitate scientific community engagement, linking trainees in diverse multi-site interdisciplinary network, where we offer things like culturally responsive cancer and cancer health disparities focused curricula, mentoring opportunities, and inter-programmatic connectivity. So here's a website where you can apply if you're you know, a graduate student, or in this case, post-bac student on up. You can get information from this website, or you can just Google UNM STEAM. That's what I usually do, and it's the first thing that pops up. You can apply to be either a scholar or a mentor, and there's also some peer mentoring also going on too. But what I want to highlight is this right here. You can apply for funding support, like we would be able to provide some support for publication, grants, travel funds. We just recently approved for funding for 2 scholars to go to the World Indigenous Cancer Conference in New Zealand. So there's a lot of support there. You can join a listserv. We have a monthly webinar, and as I also mentioned, we have that one-on-one mentorship as well. So if you want to get mentored at UNM, or if you want to get mentored, or not at, but get mentored from somebody that you're interested in their lab, like at UNM, or if you're interested in someone's lab at NMSU, you can do that. You're not only going to be exclusively, mentored at NAU. So that's what part of the benefits. And yeah, that's basically it. If you guys have any questions, you can email me. I'm also reachable at steam@nau.edu, or you can also directly email steam@UNM as well. So yeah, thank you.
So you are a future graduate or current, I know there's some current graduate students and you may be crossing that that cancer research area. You're eligible for our STEAM programming because you're here at NAU as well. All right, well, are there any other questions, comments, concerns? You could have Dr. Cannon here before she sneaks out. If you're too afraid to ask a question, you can come down and speak to her. I don't see anything online. If not, then this will be recorded and available online. Otherwise, you can contact Dr. Charlie, Dr. Cannon, myself, all right, and we will put you in contact. All right, well, thank you.